Well, welcome everyone to the Docker Crash Course, how to containerize your favorite security tools. Now, we did have a link that was up on the slides to allow people to join the Slack channel. Please do make every effort to join the Slack channel, although it's not 100% necessary. Via the Zoom chat feature, we will be working with you, Laura and Boone, who are assisting me today. They will be working to make sure that everybody's able to get transitioned over to the Slack channel. A little bit about myself. I am an instructor for the SEC 488 Cloud Security Essentials course, as well as SEC 510 Public Cloud Security for AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. When I'm not teaching for SANS, I run a company called Lucid Truth Technologies that does digital forensics consulting. And another one of my pet projects is forensicate.cloud, which has been around for a while, but it was one of the first resources on how to do digital forensics on AWS EC2 instances. I'm also an alumni of the SANS Masters program. So I'm part of the cloud curriculum, and we're very proud of all the different courses that we have offered that will allow students to get a real good in-depth training into the cloud. Another resource I just wanted to mention was headintheclouds.site, and this has a bunch of 20-minute or less videos on how to fill in some gaps with your cloud skills. It's things that we wish students came to our courses already knowing. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into our material for today. And I've got a QR code or a shortened URL, which will bring you over to a page in my Git repo. So hopefully by now everybody has this, this URL. And let me then load up the page for this course. So essentially what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be working through this GitHub page. So this is essentially a README, and then I'm going to add in additional tasks. We've got a total of 13 tasks. And for those of you that are on Slack, I will be putting up a poll to see how well we're progressing through each of the tasks. That way I can time the spacing and make sure that we're going at just the right speed for everybody. So what are we going to do today? Well, we're going to take a look at some basic Docker commands, and then we're going to learn how to create a container image. Then we're also going to push our container image to a remote repo, and we'll look at how to manage vulnerabilities, and then we'll even set up GitHub integration. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a container that has the CLI for AWS, for Azure, and for Google Cloud. And we're going to have to do some troubleshooting along the way. So once you know how to create a container that has those three different utilities on it, you should be pretty well equipped to create a container that contains any of your favorite security tools, whether it's Nmap or Metasploit or what have you. All right, so with that, I think I've got my first poll up. I want to see, okay, yep, so we've got, let me just pull down this so that everybody can see Slack. So one of my questions was, are you ready to go? And 24 people have said yes, 2 have said no. So what we need is basically to have you up and running on Ubuntu. And if you want to just listen, that's totally fine too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as a baseline. So we'll know how many people are actively, quote unquote, playing along versus just being the proverbial fly on the wall. So that will allow us to pace ourselves. All right, one of the first things that we need to do is make sure that we've got Docker installed. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a command. Okay, so now when we hit refresh, I had some unsaved merge because I made some last minute changes. All right, so what we want to do is do task 1. So if you don't have an Ubuntu user, what you're going to want to do is do this first part. And then we're going to run sudo apt get update, sudo apt install, and we're going to install some of the prerequisites. And then we'll go ahead and set up Docker to be installed. We're going to be using Docker's Community Edition. So go ahead and do that. All right, so what I'm going to do then is go through each of these steps.
Hey, Ken, before you start those steps, we've got a question in Slack. Can I use my Synology's NAS Docker system, or does it have to be on the Ubuntu system?
So all of the commands are designed to be Ubuntu friendly. So I really have no idea if you could use your NAS Docker system because we're going to be running these commands assuming what, so we're going to be doing like apt update, right? So depending on your version of Linux, you might not be using apt. So I've designed this where you can copy and paste the commands right from the Git repo README pages. So Dan, I'm going to, just to be safe, I'm going to say, yeah, you do want to use Ubuntu. So, okay. All right. So from where to access the labs? So let me post that link in the main Slack channel also. So here, there we go. Okay, good. Looks like Laura did. So thank you, Laura. All right, so we're working on task 1 right now. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the sudo apt update and sudo apt install command. So I'm just going to copy it, and I'm going to come over here into my SSH session. I'm actually using an Ubuntu EC2 instance. It's a T2 micro on Amazon EC2. So we run the update command, and I did recently update it. No. And then let's see here. Did it run both of them? Yes. Good. All right. Then the next command is adding Docker's GPG key. Just going to paste that in there. All right. So you're probably wondering where these commands came from. Well, if you read the Docker install documentation, it will give you these step-by-step commands. So one of the great things about working in the cloud is pretty much everything is documented online. You just got to use an internet search to find it. So I could do install Docker in my internet search engine, and I would most likely end up on this page. So I don't want that to be mysterious. All right, so now that I've loaded the official GPG key, I need to rerun apt-get update, and then I'm going to then start installing all the components for Docker. So I'm just copy, paste those guys in there, and then it's doing its install. Okay. And for some reason, this Ubuntu system is going to keep wanting me to put the new kernel on there. Okay, so now if I go which Docker, I can see that I'm good to go. So what I've done is I put a poll up in the Slack channel. So let me know, those of you that have got task 1 completed. We'll give that just a few minutes for people to respond to the poll. And while we're doing that, I'm going to push out task 2. All right, so we've got several folks that have said they're done. All right, so now when we go back to our web browser, if you refresh, you'll see that we now have task 2. Okay, so first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to run sudo docker images. And when I do that, I will see that I don't have any images. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is, if we try just running Docker images, we're going to get an error, a permission denied error. So let's do that. So just Control A, remove sudo. I'm going to get this error, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to add our user, our Ubuntu user, into the Docker group. So we're going to do that right here. We're going to go sudo user mod and then -ag Docker Ubuntu. And then to get it to take effect immediately, we're going to run new group. So I'm just going to copy this and paste that in there. All right, so now when I rerun Docker images, I see that it's working. So now we won't need to run sudo in front of all of our commands. All right, the next thing that we want to do is run our very first container. So what we're going to do is we're going to run the hello world, right? So that's one thing that in most programming languages, there's some version of hello world just to get you started. So let's run this one. Okay, so when we did that, we're getting hello from Docker. So that is good. Now, when I rerun Docker images, I see that I have an image listed. So the repository is hello world, and then it also will generate an image ID. So we see that this one was last made 6 weeks ago. So that's also all very good information for us to be aware of. So we got our expected message. We took a look at Docker images. Now, what if we don't want this image around? We're going to run a command called Docker RMI, but we have to give it the name of the image that we want to remove. So I'm going to do Docker RMI hello world. Problem is that there's an associated container with this image, right? So we can think of the image as the template from which the container will be launched from. So if I go, the next command that we're going to run would be Docker PS, and we're going to see that it's, well, let's just run it. So, all right, so if I run Docker PS, I don't see anything, but Docker PS by itself will only show running containers. So our container currently is not running. So I'm going to run Docker PS -- all. And then now I see that I do have a container with this ID, and it's not running. And it was given a generated name called distracted Samet. So Docker will do that. It will generate a random name for you. Okay, so the next thing that I need to do then is remove this container. And I'm going to do that using Docker RM. And I can either use the name or its container number. So let's just do that. So I'm going to go Docker RM. And then I'm going to grab its container ID. Okay, so now when I run Docker PS all, I see that it's gone. And then that allows me then to do the container or the Docker RMI hello world to remove the image. Okay, so now when I run Docker images, I see that I'm back to a clean slate. So this is just some simple Docker tools to allow us to play with managing both our containers and our images. Okay, thank you for the question, Neil. So RM will remove the containers, but RMI stands for remove image. Okay, good. So got lots of people catching up now. So let me actually show this. So if we go Docker help, we can get general help on Docker. So we see that there's the Docker RM command, remove one or more containers, and RMI, remove one or more images. So, okay, good. Okay, so yeah, so Zahid is having trouble getting Docker installed. I would go ahead and use their recommendation to install the particular package. Okay, so Dan is saying the first task 2 says Docker command not found. Yeah, let's go take a look at that. So if I'm in task 2, yeah, so you normally don't want to run your containers as root though. So you'd want to give your containers the least amount of privilege. Yeah, Zahid, I think I'm going to need to have Boone work with you. So let's see here. Okay, well, yes, this is being recorded, so there's not a problem with that at all. Plus, when we're done, you'll be able to go to the GitHub page and follow everything along a second time at your own pace. All right, so now if you hit refresh, you should see that there is a, no, there isn't yet. I got to load task 3 in there. So let me do that. Okay, so if we refresh, we now have a task 3. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to pull down a different image. We're going to pull down an Ubuntu image from the Docker Hub. So here, I'm going to just paste that command Docker pull, and I'm pulling down Ubuntu. And there we go. So now if I go Docker images, I will see that I have my Ubuntu Docker image, and it was created 2 weeks ago. Okay, so if it's created 2 weeks ago, that might mean there's actually vulnerabilities on it that have been discovered since it was last created. So we saw that it was downloaded. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to run our Docker container, but we're going to use 2 different options. We're going to use the -I, which means it's going to be interactive, and then -T, which is going to give us basically a shell into the container. All right, so we're going to run Docker run. We're going to give it a name. We're going to call it test rather than allow Docker to assign it a random name. And then we're going to pass in those switches into the Ubuntu container. And then we're going to run the bash shell from within it. Okay, so let me do that, and then I'll answer the question that was posted in the Slack. There we go. All right, so Can you explain what Docker Hub is? Absolutely. So we're going to be playing with Docker Hub here momentarily. So Docker Hub is a repository that you can sign into, and you can use it. There's free version and paid versions. So Ubuntu is hosted by the Docker organization in Docker Hub, but anybody, as you'll see from this course that we're doing today, can create a container image and host it up on Docker as well. So there is definitely some security implications of that as well. So you don't want to necessarily trust anybody's container. You want to know where the code came from that created that container. So back here, when we pull down the Ubuntu container, we're trusting that because that was published by Docker. But we still you still want to be very careful with which containers you pull down and run, especially in production. So what you'd want to do is you'd want to make your own containers for production. That way you know the code provenance. So is Docker Hub a container registry? It absolutely is. Yep. So, okay. So, all right, where are we at? We just ran Docker images, and coming back to our instructions. Oh, yeah, so we ran our container. Now we can run various commands on it. So notice how my prompt changes. First of all, it says root at, and then the host name is actually the container ID. Right, so now what I can do is I can go who am I, for example, or pwd to see which directory I'm in, or what other commands, host name. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm running bash inside the container. And this is going to be pretty handy for us because, oh yeah, I forgot to run ls. So let's do that. I can see that I'm at the root of the file system. If I go ls/home, I'll see that there's really nothing in there. Okay, so I can also type exit to get out of the container. Now I'm back on my main host. All right. Now let's list the container. We're going to use Docker PS all again. PS-all. And we see there it is. And we can see that it exited 28 seconds ago. All right, the next thing that we want to do is, we can also run the container again by using Docker start. So let's do that. So we're going to go Docker start -i to make it interactive again. And then we're just going to give it the name of that container. So remember, it's called test. So pasting that in, we're going to say started again in interactive mode. And which container? Well, the test container. So there I'm back. So and I'm just going to simply exit again. Now, another thing that I wanted to point out was rather than passing in bash, we could pass in another command into the container that it will run when the container launches. So and that's simply going to do the ls command. Is there an easy way of renaming these containers to something human readable? I tend to be doing lots of copy and paste in Docker since I can't remember. Well, I do a lot of copy and paste as well. Probably the easiest way is when you launch it, give it a name, right? So that's what we did here. When we said Docker run, we gave it the name of test. Now, if we go into Docker help, there's other commands that may be applicable to change the name. But usually you just do it when you launch it. Okay, so all right. Now the other thing that I want to show you is we can use another switch, which is --RM. So what this is going to do is when the container exits, it's going to remove it. So why would the uptime be 4 days? Let's see, where's that coming from? So if we come back here. I don't know why you're seeing an uptime of 4 days. Can you give us a screenshot, Neil? Okay, so let's go ahead and run this command, docker run rm. This time we're going to call the container test2. Okay, so when I rerun docker ps all, notice that I only see the one called test. I don't see the container called test2 because as soon as it exited, it removed the container. Let's go ahead and start task 4. So here what we're going to do is we're going to play with the Ubuntu image. Wait, we're gonna make our own custom image. I'm sorry, I was on the wrong task. All right, so let's first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make a file for our future web server. We're going to make a directory called HTML, and then we're simply going to put a sentence into a file called index.html. And I need to make sure I'm not on the Docker host, so you should see the prompt of your main Ubuntu system. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and paste that. Oh. Copy it into my, there we go, into my clipboard. Now I can paste it. All right, so now if I go ls, I should see that HTML directory. So if I go ls HTML, we will see that we have this index.html, which says exactly Sans Docker crash course. Very good. Now, the next thing is what we're going to do is we're going to make a Docker file. So we're going to copy 2 different sentences into Dockerfile. We're going to say from nginx, and then we're going to say copy the HTML directory into this path inside the container. So let's do that. Okay, so now if I do ls, you should see a Docker file there. I can even go cat and see that it looks exactly as expected. So this is the very beginning of our Docker file. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to run it. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a container. We're going to call this container sans. So here's our command to do that. Oh, and by the way, the period indicates our current directory. That's where that Docker file is located. So okay. So now if I go Docker images, I will see a shiny new one called sans. Yeah, and we also see our Ubuntu one from that was there previously. All right. You may see one called nginx. And that was just because we're basing it from Nginx, right? So we have a base container of Nginx. And then all we did was we copied this particular path into that container. So now that we've made our container, let's go ahead and run it. So this time we'll give the container the name of Crash Course, and we're launching it from the SANS container image. The other thing that we're doing is we're using this -p because what we're going to do is we're going to map port 80 in the container to port 8080 on our host. I've done it port 80 to port 80, but I wanted to do it this way just to make it really clear. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that. Okay, so I ran it, but why am I not seeing a prompt? Because we didn't tell it we wanted it to be in interactive mode. It's actually running in the background. That's what the -d does. But we should now have our web server listening on port 8080. So let's see if that's the case. Let's use curl. So we're going to curl localhost port 8080. And when we do, we should get our little message, SANS Docker crash course, right? So if I had a much more elaborate web page, we would have seen that. Okay, somebody's getting an error making the SANS container. All right, so Neil says, so you use the existing image called Nginx hosted by Docker and pulled it to your Docker instance. Yes, we could have pulled down the Nginx container locally, but I didn't, right? So yeah, Alex makes the point that when you're making Docker images, you're basically adding layers on top of layers. So Nginx is a layer that is being built upon, right? So you start with like a base container and then you build on top of it. All right, so so CyberKnight is saying they're getting an Nginx 403 error when running the curl command. So what I'm wondering is, let me just type history. I love the history command because then I can see all the commands that I run recently. So if you're getting an error, 403 error, I suspect you might have had a problem with your creating your Docker file. Make sure your Docker file looks like, let me run this command again. So if I go explanation 31, it's going to rerun cat Dockerfile. So make sure your Docker file looks like this. And then the other thing is that make sure that that you ran this command properly as well. Those are the things I can think of. Do you need to have the Ubuntu image to be pulled down to run the Nginx image? You do not, right? The Nginx image does include everything, right? Yep, absolutely. Okay, so hopefully you had luck running curl localhost. And then, well, let's go ahead and take a look at our running images. So let's run that Docker PS command. All right, so there's the name. We can see that's mapped port 8080 to port 80 on the container. And it was based off the SANS image. That was our, yeah, okay. So the next thing that we want to do is, oh, there's another command called Docker top. So let's do that. What this will do is it will show the processes running inside the container. Yep, so I can see that well, I've got Nginx running, two different processes, a worker processor and a master process. All right, Neil, best of luck to you. Thanks for joining for the part you could. All right. Oh, we can also stop our container whenever we want. So let's do that. And now if I run Docker PS, I will see that's not running, but if I do Docker PS all, I see that it is there, right? I actually see both of them. All right, now the other thing that we can do is we can clean up our home, the directory that we created here. So back here, I do ls, right? I see these, so let's go ahead and remove those. Just so we're keeping things clean. Right, so we're clean. All right, so that is that task. If you weren't able to do task 4, that's fine, because it's not a requirement for anything going forward. Okay, so one person said he got task 4, but never got by task 1. Interesting. Sorry about that. Well, maybe Boone can work with you and help you get situated. Sorry about that, Dan. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to make a container that runs the AWS CLI. So let's do that. So we're going to make a brand new Dockerfile. We're going to say from Ubuntu, and then I'm going to put in basically a blank line. So let's do that. Okay, so now if I do cat of my Dockerfile, we see that it just simply says from Ubuntu. All right, now we're going to add in, so how do we install the AWS CLI normally onto an Ubuntu system? Well, let's go take a look at the user guide. Okay, so here, installing or updating the latest version. So then if we expand the Linux, we would see that, well, for a Linux system, we're going to run curl, and we're going to get this file right here. Then we're going to unzip it, and then we're going to install it. So this is how we'd go about installing our tools. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to put it into Notepad or some other text editor. All right, and I'm just going to paste that. Okay. So I got that as my reference. Okay, so now let's just spin up our test container. So we're going to call this one dev. So Docker run dev. I want it to be interactive with a shell into it. And there we go. Okay, so now what I want to do, now that I'm inside the container, is I want to try installing the CLI into the container. Let's do this one command at a time. So the first command we're going to run is this first one, curl, and we're going to reach out and grab that file. Oh, curl command not found. Okay, so what's that tell me? I need a dependency in place. So what we'll do is we're going to then install curl. So I'm going to install it into my container. We're going to do sudo apt update and then install the -y, which says don't prompt me for a yes or no. Okay. So let's try that. Okay, so that ran without issues. So what I need to do is I need to come in here and I need to add that in to the top of my text file. Right? Okay, now the next one is we need to run unzip of this file. Right, so if I run ls, we'll see that I have this, where did I? All right, let's go ahead and run this next command, this unzip. Where is my? Oh, I need to rerun the curl command. There we go. So now it's downloaded. Now I can, now when I run ls, there I'll see it. Okay, so we're going to unzip this bad boy. Oh, looks like, no. Control A to go to the beginning. There we go. But it says unzip not found. So I got to repeat the same process. So, yep, you're going to need to install sudo as well. You're just maybe a step ahead of me. All right, so let's go ahead and install the install zip. Or unzip, I should say. Okay, I also need to remember that I need to add that to my things to install. Okay, so now that I've installed it, now let's try rerunning our unzip, and that worked. So Den says, why are we running commands as sudo if we're root? Well, it's an excellent question, but what we're going to do later here is we're going to make it so we're not running it as root. So I just left it in there. So we're going to have to, but we'll fix that. So I was able to unzip it. And then the next command was to simply run sudo AWS install. So at this point, you're right. We don't need to run it as sudo, but we are going to need sudo. So let's go ahead and install sudo while we're at it. So, and remember to use the -y so you're not prompted, because all of this is going to go into our Dockerfile. And the Dockerfile will fail if you're needing to say yes when you're installing stuff. Okay, so we've now kind of figured out all the commands. So they're all right here. So these commands are going to end up in our Dockerfile. Okay, so let's test our CLI installation. We can run AWS hyphen version, AWS hyphen version. And so I installed sudo, but I didn't run my installs. I got to rerun my install. This is why we're testing it at each step along the way. So we're going to create an image. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to create a Docker file now that we know the commands. All right, so let's run that AWS hyphen version just to make sure it works. Okay, good. All right. So we're going to get into how to make that Docker file now. So, right. So here's our full set of commands to install it. But now what we're going to do is we're going to, we'd also want to remove the zip file from inside our container. So what you'll typically do is you'll separate each of these commands with double ampersands. What the double ampersand says, execute the following command if the previous command ran successfully. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add the following to our Docker file. So let me show you what we're doing here. Right here, I'm going to go at, and then I'm going to remove it. Remove the character return. At, remove the character return. At, remove the carriage return. And then another at, remove the carriage return, and one more at, remove the carriage. So this is all going to be one line. And now I've got multiple installs. So what I can do is I can do these all in one line. So I can do, say, install curl and unzip and sudo at the same time. Right? So there we go. And then in front of this, what I need to do is use the run command. Okay. So that is how I came up with this down here. And by the way, anything with a pound is of course commented. So let's just run this group of commands. So I need to exit out of my container, by the way, so I should see my prompt. I'm just going to run clear to bring it up to the top. So if I go cat Dockerfile, this is what it currently looks like. Now I'm going to run the commands. And then let's run cat Dockerfile again. There we go. So this is what your Dockerfile should look like. Okay, now we're going to build it. So we're going to call our image my tools, my_tools. And of course, our Dockerfile is in our current directory. So that's what that period means again. So when I run this, so it's installing all this stuff into the container image. Okay, now if I go Docker images, I have a shiny new one called my tools. All right. So let's go ahead and run our new container image. So, and I'm just going to run it with bash. So paste that. All right. So if all went well, I should be able to run AWS --version. And I do. All right. So we have now successfully built a container image that has the AWS CLI in it. Okay. So the question, how do you get from Dockerfile to my tools? What I did was I ran docker build -t, and then I gave it the name of the image, which was going to be my tools. And then I said, use the Dockerfile in the current directory. So Neil, let me know if that helped. Just give me a thumbs up or something. Okay, cool. All right. So I can exit out of my container image. And let's see, was there anything else to do with this particular task? All right, yeah. So that was task 5. All right, so yep, let us know if you got task 5 done. And I'm going to push out task 6. So there's a question that was posted in from Zoom. How can we tell that the task is complete? How can we check? Well, the idea of the tasks is you're just following along. So if when you, for example, at the end of task 5, if you were able to run AWS -- version from inside the container, then you know that you had success. So. Neil's getting a failed to solve. Okay, yeah, Neil, since you jumped away and came back, what I'm thinking is you might have just missed a step. But that's the beauty of having it all saved for posterity in my Git repo. All right, so I'm going to refresh the page and we can jump into task 6. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to add the Azure CLI. So if we go into the Azure documentation, let's do that. So yeah, we want to choose our Ubuntu installation method where we're going to use apt. And if you read, there will be, you can do it with one command, but we're going to do it using option 2, step by step. So if I essentially combine all these commands, you will get what we're seeing here in task 6. So I've just brought it all together. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to use apt version versus apt. So I just rewrote it without apt get, right? It's less characters. Yes. So Alexandro says we're going to have AWS and Azure CLI in the same Dockerfile. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a best practice. You probably would want to have separate Docker files, but we're doing it just for the fun because we wanted one container that has all of our tools. And notice that this is more of a client-side container. It's not going to be a hosted service. All right. So so this is our new set of commands. But what we're going to do again is we're going to put the double ampersand in between them all. And that will give us a new set of commands. So we're going to put in a comment line for the Azure CLI. We're going to then create the run statement, and then we're going to put a space after it. So that's what those 3 do. So copy that into my clipboard. And so let me do the before and after of my Dockerfile. That's the before. Now I'm going to run these commands. And let's do an after. All right, so hopefully your Dockerfile now looks like this. So we have from Ubuntu, and we've got our Azure CLI, I'm sorry, our AWS CLI and our Azure CLI. All right, now it's time to try them. So we're going to run build, and we're going to build it and run it all in the same group now that we're starting to get comfortable with this. So build it and run it. Now it's going to take a little bit longer to build because we're installing 2 separate packages, the AWS CLI as well as the Azure CLI. So we're kind of taking a crawl, walk, run approach. We're making a more and more complex container as we go. So for the Docker file, there's no naming convention. Yeah, well, when we build our container, we're giving it a name. That's what we're doing there. Okay, so while that's working, let's go ahead and take a look at our page here. So once it runs, we're going to run AZ version. So you're getting some certificate errors probably from this, I'm going to guess. Yes, it will. Yes, it will overwrite. Well, it kind of overwrites the existing image, Matthew. We're going to take a look at that when we run Docker images. We're going to see something pretty interesting here. All right, see if okay, it's done running. So now I can run AZ space -- version. And we should see that right now. These versions might be slightly different than the documentation, but my current version is 2.49.0. All right, so we've now successfully completed task 6. I'm going to type exit again to exit out of here. Yes, we're adding the blank lines just to make the Docker file more readable. Very good point, Anthony. Yes, the session is being recorded, everybody, so not to worry. So there's a question from Zoom. Can one use the same SSL cert across all cloud CLIs? No, I think you're just going to want to stick with the default installation scripts. Make life easy on yourself. So, okay, Dan, double check your syntax for your Azure CLI. There might be some sort of system dependency that you're not meeting. All right. Oh, now right here, let's do Docker images. And notice that I have a image here called none that was from 10 minutes ago, but I have my tools latest. That's from 3 minutes ago. So what happened was this image ID can no longer be called my tools with the tag of latest. So the tag was essentially removed. So it's basically an interim one or an intermediate one. But we'll deal with that. We could do RMI and remove the image, right? So let's do that for fun. Yeah, so now that intermediate one is gone. All right, so AZ version is hanging. Yes, so Alexandra says, can we run the Docker image passing in AWS space -- version? We could, but then it would just run it and then it would go away, right? So yeah, you could definitely give that a try. So that's applying one of the concepts that we learned earlier. All right, so Dan is getting the certificate error that's preventing him from getting the Azure CLI. All right, so what I'm going to recommend, Dan, is that you go in and oh yeah, yeah, if you have something that is on your computer that is, or in your network out to the internet that is interfering, that could cause problems. So what you can do is run vim Dockerfile and come in here and simply comment out this line, right? You could do that. That would be fine. And you just continue on without using the Azure CLI. All right, so let's see here. All right, so we've said we've got about 12 people that are through task 6. If you've completed task 6 but haven't voted, please do, so that way I can see how well we're doing, keeping everybody moving forward as a group. Okay, great. So 26 through, that's wonderful. All right, now I just pushed out task 7, so let's go take a look at it. All right, so next we're going to add the G-Cloud CLI, and we're doing multiple because you're going to run into different issues, and that's why we tested at each step along the way. So let's go take a look at the Google documentation. So if you say you're going to install it on Ubuntu, there is a set of instructions that, of course, will be different than if you're installing it on Windows or Mac. And one of the cool things is if you scroll down far enough, you'll see that it actually will give you the Docker command. So we're going to basically use this one right here. And the reason why I'm taking you into the documentation is because if you're installing your own favorite security tools, you're going to need to read the instructions and work through the install process. So, but sometimes they may even show you how to run it in your own container. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to just use our text editor. So we're going to add this line in that we got right out of the documentation, but we want to make sure that our Dockerfile looks like this. So I'm going to copy this. And, I was just in here in Vim, right? But what I'm going to do is quit, and then I'm just going to go RM Dockerfile. And then I'm going to go back into Vim Dockerfile and start over, go into insert mode, and then just paste it in there, right? Or you could have just added these following lines, right? But all right, so save it, right? So we want to make sure that our, well, let me just do cat Dockerfile. So make sure your Dockerfile looks like this, because we're going to be building it here. All right, so our same command as before to build it and to run it. Let's do that. Oh, good, Dan. I'm glad you solved your man in the middle issue. Okay, so now we're building our container image that has all 3 tools. And once we have success proving that the G-Cloud one works as well, we're then going to make things more complicated. We're going to make it so that those 3 CLIs are no longer going to be running in the container as root. So that will force us to have to do some troubleshooting and error resolution. The question is, when we run from Ubuntu, does that mean we need to have the Ubuntu image pulled locally? No, because if you remember, we did not pull down the Nginx image, but we said we referenced it. So that's why we didn't see the Nginx listed as a local container image. Okay, somebody's got a install error with their just waiting for my build to finish. Yeah, so it's been going for 2 minutes. Okay, there. All right. All right. So now let's run gcloud -- version. Got our expected output. Let's just to make sure, let's run Azure -- version. And that works. And just to make sure, let's run AWS -- version. All right. Yeah. So now we've got all three CLIs installed in our image. Okay. So now I see your question, Jeremy. We will definitely circle back to that. All right. Let's see if there's anything else that we need to do. Nope, that was it. So we're going to exit from our container. Oop. Okay, so let me just remember. Okay, we just finished task 7. So let us know if you got task 7 done. I'm going to put the poll up. Okay, so the question for later: recommendations to convert an existing Ubuntu VM Oracle box, for example, Oracle box, to a container image. Well, I think what you'd want to do is install just what you need into the container, right? So we even questioned the wisdom of putting all 3 CLIs into the same container image. The idea with a container image is you want to be able to manage the life cycle, right? So as you make change, you won't make a change inside the container. You'll just publish a new container image. The only reason why we were doing it interactively in the Ubuntu one is we wanted to make sure that we knew which commands we needed to include in our Dockerfile. But yeah, normally what you do is you would modify the Dockerfile rather than going into the container and installing stuff. So that would be the one big point for you, Jeremy. The other would be, again, just installing only the commands that you're sure you wanted to include. Containers work great, but they're not necessary, or they're not the perfect solution for everything. Sometimes a virtual machine is still the better solution. And you can have immutable virtual machines as well that are still managed the same way you would manage containers, by building them and making changes to the infrastructure as code behind the image. All right, so yep, we've got the same core group of 28, 29 folks that are hanging with us, keeping up to date. So that's good. All right. So now I have pushed out task 8. And task 8 is where things get interesting. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a non-privileged user. So above actually right below the from Ubuntu, we're going to add in a command user add. We're going to create a user called sans. And what we need to do, because we want this sans user to be part of our sudoers group, we need to install sudo first. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add this line right here into a file called etc sudoers. Then we're going to set the user that the container is going to be run to our new user called sans. Oh, and by the way, we also need to create a home directory for our sans user. All right, so let's go in and add those in there. So actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my trick here. I'm just going to copy the new file. We're really just adding these. You could just insert those in, but I'm going to just copy the whole thing. Go here, and I'm going to go rm Dockerfile. And then I'm going to go vim Dockerfile. Oh. And go into insert mode and just paste it. And then write it and quit. Okay, so cat. Yep, so make sure your Docker file looks like this, where we've got in this new privileged user, those 4 lines. All right, now let's build it. And when we build it, we're probably going to see some errors. Oh, there's our errors. Okay, so look, permission denied. All right. So yeah, right here, it looks like what we need to do is basically go in and add sudo. All right, so let's do that. So I'm going to switch back here. And I think in the interest of time, there's a couple of iterative steps where we basically have the same error. So now let's make sure that we've got all of these fixed. So we're going to change the AWS instruction first. So I'm going to go vim and go into insert mode. I'm going to put the AWS instruction right under the other one temporarily, right? So what we did was we added sudo in there in front of apt install, and we also put, yeah, that was it. All right, so I'm going to come up here and delete this line. Good. Oh, there's one other thing I needed. I wanted to go in and change the gcloud one as well. Looks like the Azure CLI one has sudo in the right spots. So we got to come into the gcloud one. So I'm going to go in insert mode. I'll paste the new gcloud one as well. Okay. All right, so what changed here? So we got sudo in front of our T, and we got sudo in front of apt update and apt install. Okay, so get out insert mode, delete the previous lines. There we go, and save it. Now we're going to build it and see if we have taken care of all of our errors. let that build. All right, yeah, so once it's built, we should be able to test all three. Yeah, so Alexandro says, is it me or is using sudo inside my Docker make feel unsafe? So what we're doing here is this would be a container that you would use locally, right? So again, you're not hosting anything. You'd only run it locally. So, and I think, your user will be able to elevate with root and become root. But when you're running the CLI commands, those would be run not as root. Also, Laura has put up a link to evaluate this workshop. And we always love that feedback. SANS is a data-driven company, so give us the data that lets us know what you thought of this workshop. We still have some more tasks to complete, but we're well on our way. We should be completing right at 11 o'clock Eastern time. So somewhere right around the 2-hour mark. Okay, so my container's almost done being built. So Dan asks, how many CPEs for this course? So I'll let Laura answer that. Okay, so here's the number of seconds that it's been going for almost 3 minutes. Yeah, so Anastasios, you may have been missing a sudo somewhere. So that's my guidance for you. Now, if I could run each of the CLIs individual. Oh, I need to run it too, don't I? So I've got my container built. Now let's go in and run it. So I'm just going to go Docker run RM, right? Okay, so I could go which AWS, AZ, and G Cloud. And that shows me that all of them are installed, right? So I can exit my container and we're good to go. All right. So next up is task 8, or I'm sorry, task 9. So I'm gonna so let me know if you got task 8 done. Okay, so I just pushed out task 9. Let's take a look. All right. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna play with Docker Hub. So I've already introduced Docker Hub. So that is right here. So I've logged in as a basic account. I have a premium version of Docker Hub that we'll look at here in a moment. But when you first log in, we have no repositories created. So Docker RMI seems to remove the images, but doesn't free up the space. Yeah, so there is Docker prune, which will basically blow everything away. In fact, we're going to be using that here in a little bit. All right, so now go ahead and take a moment and create a Docker Hub account. You'll need to give them your email address. So I created one called khman52. Yeah, can you please show me your Docker file? So let's do that again. At Docker file. So it's right here. And for those of you that are in Zoom, let me put it into Slack. I know if you're not on Slack, you won't be able to access it, but there. Boone, maybe you could make a gist, GitHub gist that contains this as well, and post that into the Zoom chat for our friend. Okay. All right. So anyway, back to Docker Hub. So here's our Docker Hub. So let's see what we needed to do here. We're going to create a new repository called My Tools, and we're going to leave it public. So over here in Docker Hub, I'm going to click repositories, and I'm going to say create repository, and I'm going to give this the name, My Tools. And I'm going to make it public and then click create. Okay, so here's the command that we could push it to Docker. Okay, so and we're going to be using that. Now, but we're going to do a trick so that you can copy and paste. I want you to set an environment variable called dhuser. That will allow you to copy and paste my commands in the upcoming tasks. So I'm going to copy that and now you don't want to use my username. You want to set it to your username. So the one I'm using for this part is going to be khman52. All right, so that is task 9 is completed. So I want to see who's done with that because I know it may take a moment to get your Docker account set up. Okay, yep. So let me know if you've got Docker Hub set up and you've set your environment variable to your Docker Hub username. Oh, yeah, you definitely want it to be on your host, not inside your container. Yep. So back here, you want to make sure that you're seeing the prompt of your host, not the prompt for being inside your container. Thank you for that clarifying question. All right, so I'm going to give folks just a little bit more time to get their Docker Hub set up. We still got some folks getting that going. Okay, so now let's take a look at our images in our that are local. So we're just going to run Docker images. All right, so there's my tools. Now, before we can push it up though, we need to tag this with the name of our user account. So that's what we're going to do in this next step. We're going to go Docker tag my tools, and then we're going to use our variable that we set so we can simply just copy and paste it. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and just copy that command and run it. Now let's rerun Docker images. Notice that I have two with the exact same image ID. So this is not taking up 4 gigabytes. It's 2 gigabytes, but there's two different ways to refer to it. One is its full name, which is in my case, khman52/mytools, or my tools by short. But we need to have it tagged like this so that we can push it up to the repository. All right. Now, the next thing that we're going to need to do, though, is we're going to need to log in. So I'm going to run Docker login. Then I got to look up my Docker login. And my name is right, khman. Yours is going to be different. And then what was the password? Cool, login succeeded. Now notice there's also an error, a message here that my credential is saved in this file. So that is definitely a risk. You'd want to manage that risk. It would be better to use a credential helper. There's multiple better ways to do that, but we're learning. And so we're just going to go the path of least resistance, which is just to leave it logged in here locally. All right, so now I'm logged in. Yeah, what's my password? I had to think about that, right? So, all right, now what we're going to do is we're going to do a push command. So we're going to go Docker push up to your username /mytools latest. So pasting this up, it's basically pushing it up layer by layer. Got some folks type in. Some good resources. Yep. I love 1Password. Yeah. In fact, I tweeted about how you can, they've even made a nice integration for like the AWS access keys into 1Password. So a lot of good stuff. Yep. So this is pushing your image up to Docker Hub. Yes, indeed. And we're actually going to take a look at it once mine finishes. Somebody's joking about LastPass. Yeah. All right, so we'll just give this just a little bit more. I'm almost there. No, only what's getting pushed up is your My Tools image. So yeah, like the sans and the other stuff, yeah, that's not getting, and what we're going to do is we're going to run the prune all here in a minute because we're going to pull it down and rerun it. So we'll see that in action here too. All right, so I'm almost got my image pushed. It's pushing up multiple different layers is what it's doing. And that's actually more efficient because it can use multi-threading. Okay, so now let's go back to my Docker Hub web page. And if I refresh it, I should see that it's there. Okay, so here's my latest. So if I click here, this is the different layers that got pushed up. And notice here that it's analyzing the image. That's a pretty cool enhancement. So it's looking for vulnerabilities. So this is a recent change. So behind the scenes, even with the free account, because this KHman 52 is a free account, what Docker Hub is doing is it's looking to see if there's vulnerabilities. And we're going to come back here and we're going to be surprised because, yeah, there is definitely some vulnerabilities. Right. So let's see what else we needed to do. All right. Now what we're going to do is let me know if you got your image pushed up. So I'm going to post the poll for that. Now, so the question is, no, you do not need a pro account at this point. So what I was demonstrating was a basic account. All right. You only need the pro account, and that would be for the last task, which is task 13. So will the Docker file be published, automatically be published for viewing there? Yes. So if I come over here and I look at my image details, this is public. So as an example, you could go into my page and look at it. So let me do that. I think I can come back here. Nope, I can't do that. Let's see here. Repositories. Okay, I'm going to share mine with you. So for those of you that are following along on video but are not doing the exercise, you should be able to come in here and look. And this is what you're seeing if you click that link is exactly what I saw after pushing that up. I've not done anything else. All right, so yeah, we got several folks that said they're done or almost done with pushing their image to Docker Hub. So let me make task 11 available. Now with task 11, what we're going to do is we're going to pull it down. So, but before we do, we're going to run Docker system prune all. Oh, and let's also run Docker logout. So we're Docker logout. Right, so that got rid of my credentials, and then we're going to run the Docker system prune all. Yes, want to continue. And now a whole bunch of stuff is getting blown away. Okay, yep. So Neil is saying upgrade your subscription, which is interesting because I am totally logged in with a basic one. So I wonder if it depends on how old your subscription is, or if you just created it new. Neil, did you create a brand new one today? Ah, yeah, mine is older too. Okay, well, anyway, so let's do Docker images. We see that we have nothing. And also if I go Docker ES -- all, we see that we don't have any containers either. All right. So now the next thing that we're going to do is, so I created my KHman 52 Docker Hub account so that I would have a non-privileged account for the purpose of showing this. All right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go Docker pull and pull it down because remember, it is a public repo. and it'll take a moment to pull it down, but it pulls down a lot faster than it pushes up. That's the good news. Almost done. What we're demonstrating here is that once it's up in your repo, you can pull it down to one or more different systems, and you have everything you need. So now if I run Docker images, I see that I have my tools there, and we can also run it. But remember, I have to run it via its full name. Right, and then which? AWS, AZ, G Cloud. And there they are. Exit out. And that was task 11. Neil, I'm not sure your question. Okay, so let me post up the status for task 11. How are the images updated? Well, what we need to do is we would need to build them again and then push them up. So that's actually a very important question, George, because, well, let's go back to my Docker Hub. If I refresh this, we'll see if the vulnerability data is there yet. Builds. Oh yeah, I'm starting to see it hasn't populated the details, but I can see that I've got 1 critical, 6 high, 7 mediums. So in a few moments, we should actually start seeing the details. So there we go. Here's all the details. So there is definitely some concern here. Yep. So yeah, as Alex is making the point, is what you do is you would, when you rebuild it, so let's say you waited a month from now, if you ran the build, what it would do is it would pull down all the most recent stuff from AWS, from Azure, from Google Cloud, and hopefully they would have addressed some of these vulnerabilities, but then other times they may have introduced new vulnerabilities as well. Okay, so yeah, looks like many people have said that they finished task 11 or are just about to. Pushing out task 12 here. Right. Yeah. So for task 12, enable the vulnerability scanning. So this is pretty interesting because in the past, you would have to go in and specifically enable vulnerability scanning, and it was now being done. And now it's being done by Docker Scout. In the past, it was done by Sneak, and that did require you to have a premium subscription. So you may need to go into the advanced image analysis and enable it. Let's see what else is there in this task. So, another thing that we might want to do is allow our user to use bash instead of sh. So that would involve a couple other tweaks. And the main reason I did that was so that after we enabled the advanced image scanning, which seems to be on by default now, that we'd have a change, because again, every time you make a change and then rebuild it, it will then get updated. Yeah, so if you go into here under builds, yeah, here's where you can upgrade your account. And that's what we need to do for step 13. So I'm going to go ahead and push step 13 as well. And then, but that does require a premium one. So task 13, if you don't want to upgrade, it'd be $5 a month for $60 a year. So I bought a year's subscription. So so you can consider this last step. Just kind of watch if you don't want to go ahead and do the upgrade. You could probably do the upgrade for just a single month and, you know, have invested $5, but okay. So I'm going to refresh tasks to get to task 13. So this does require the paid Docker Hub account. So what I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go sign out. And then I'm going to log in with my paid one. Okay. And what I need to do is create the repository again. So this is going to be called My Tools. Now, if you had upgraded yours, you wouldn't need to do the push. But so now what I need to do is I need to do a tag again. So I'm going to come over here into my Docker host, and I'm going to go export DH user. And this time it's going to be resistor, which is my premium account. Okay. Now, as we did back here, what was it, task 11? No, task 10. I need to tag it again. Let me do Docker images. Okay, so I'm going to tag it again, paste, but it's going to throw an error. Why is it going to throw an error? Because it's saying it can't find this one, because this one is actually called khman 52 /. Okay, now when I rerun Docker images, you'll see what I did here. So I've got, ooh. All right, let me do this. Let me oh, thank you. Thank you, Dan, for that. What I do. Do I have a typo? I think I'm missing the check. That's what I did. Okay. Export resistor 52. Got it. Thank you. There we go. Whew. Okay, now I should be able to do the push again too. And this time it'll go up to the other repository. So if I go into my history, I'm going to do, where is that? Push. So I'm going to rerun command 90. Explanation point 91 or 90. And there we go. And oh, I need to log in, right? So Docker login. And this time it's resistor. It helps when you spell your name right. Give me a second to pull it out of my vault. Okay. Okay, now we can push it. Okay, let's see here. Echo $DH user. Let's set that variable properly. Docker log out. Okay, Docker log in. And my password. Okay, now let's try pushing it. Let's try doing it this way. Okay. So my image does not exist. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna go. It's kind of fun to watch the instructor struggle a little bit, right? So we're gonna remove the image. Okay, now if I go Docker images, it does not exist, but I can go ls, my Docker file is still there. So I'm going to go Docker. And I'm going to rerun it. So I'm going to go rerun command 82. And I'm going to rebuild my Docker image. I'm going to tag it. And then we'll be able to play with the. So can you use Sneak to scan the image? I believe you can. That's the way it used to be before they made Docker Hub integrated right into it. So, all right. So essentially what we're going to do here before we wrap up is I'm making a fresh image. I'm going to push it up to my paid version of Docker Hub. And then what I'm going to do is show the GitHub integration with it. Because what's really cool about this is we just go into GitHub, we make a modification, and then as soon as we commit that to the main branch, it pushes it up. It has it built and pushed up to Docker Hub. So we'll give it 2 more minutes to finish its build. Appreciate all you guys sharing your knowledge with each other. That's what really makes this type of an event very meaningful. All right, while that is going on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into GitHub and make a repo. So I'm going to duplicate my tab. And I'm going to go up here. I'm going to click create a new repository. And I'm going to call this my tools. And I need to say that's going to be for me. Okay. And I'm going to give it a description. And I can leave it public. What else did I need to do? So give it my tools. I'm going to click add a README and choose MIT license. All right, so I have a shiny new repository. Let me just double check to see if my thing is done. It's almost done. All right, and then back in my instructions. So I've got my so I'm going to go ahead and modify or create a Dockerfile. So I'm going to come over here and go create new file. I'm going to call this Dockerfile. And paste this in here. There we go. So now if I look at my Docker file, there we go. Okay. So comment in from Zoom, Trivi from Aquasec to scan for vulnerabilities. Yep. So there's a variety of different hosts for doing scanning. All right. See if my thing is done. Yes, it is. Okay. So now the next thing that I need to do is push it. And Bing 117. Oh, I need to tag it. So that would be right here. Let me just do it. Docker tag my tools. And then resistor. My tools. Check my work. All right. And then I can push it. So I'm going to use command 117 again. Just follow along the instructions. Hopefully you enjoyed the session. And with that, we'll call it a wrap. Thank you, everyone.